We've covered drop pods and drop ships before, but planetary invasions are so much more than just using those to land in the first wave. There's bigger, more vulnerable transports that come later, different landing sites to consider with their own risks and rewards, the benefits of having sneaky behind-the-lines troops, and massive long-term infrastructure that might come afterward. So invasions are far more than that first battle, and today's Spacedock video will be going into all of those extra details. Where there are multiple planets in sci-fi, there's a good chance there's going to be someone who wants to invade them. There's many reasons for this to happen, from capturing the planet to something smaller scale, or perhaps a combination of both. One of the more common and dramatic ways we see this happen is drop pods or drop ships descending directly into combat. And yes, this is cool, but it's not the only way to do things. Just because you can drop equipment directly into a battle doesn't mean you always should. That places extreme risk on the craft doing the dropping, as they have to come to a halt to drop things off, and if it's a craft designed for combat drops, then it's probably not very good at large-scale transport. Think of the difference between an LAAT and an acclimator. The smaller craft are very good at getting around a battlefield and depositing single units where they need to be, and they're heavily armed enough to either make room for a landing or to support troops after the fact. But an acclimator is designed for massive transport. It can bring down a whole army, but needs a lot of space to do that, preferably in a nice, secure landing site. You wouldn't want to try to land this directly onto a battlefield because the loading ramps are a massive bottleneck that also lead directly into the vulnerable interior of the ship. Halo 3 has another brilliant example of this whole idea of securing a safe area with a landing on the Ark. It starts out with drop pods and pelicans to get the lay of the land and to find a nice, safe location for the frigate Forward unto Dawn to dramatically zip into a cool as hell landing to deploy heavier equipment. Mass Effect has basically the same thing on Vermeer, where Commander Shepard is first dropped off ahead in the Mako to take out anti-air guns to then make room for the Normandy to safely arrive. 2007 really was a good year for making landing sites for frigates, wasn't it? Since we're in sci-fi land, there's also the option of teleporting, which may seem really well suited for invasions, but does have its downsides. Yes, you can pop in where you want without putting a landing craft at risk, but you also don't necessarily have a clear picture of the landing site before you get in there. Like, what if you beam in directly in front of somebody with a gun? And you also don't get the benefit of potential air support from a landing craft. You're just on your own. You may get the benefit of surprise, but it's a different risk-reward scenario going on, though I can certainly see it being extremely helpful for a secure landing site. What counts as a secure location also includes somewhere nowhere near where an actual battle might take place, or even the final goals of the invaders, like the invasion of Naboo, which the Trade Federation kicks off by landing on the entire opposite side of the planet, despite the big iconic landing craft all being pretty heavily armed. To some extent, this is so Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan can have fun adventures with fish and then bigger fish while racing the droid armies to the city, but this distance also ensures the craft can unload their droid armies completely unopposed. A sensible, risk-free approach to deploying troops in a situation where there was little doubt they could overwhelm any defenders anyway. The delay in travel time means nothing to the overall strategy, at least it would have if the Jedi didn't throw a wrench into the plans by getting Padme off-world. The Covenant in Halo Reach do things kind of similarly, with the extra addition of cloaking the bulk of their forces to keep their presence as hidden as possible. Which again, makes total sense. Their goals on the planet were to find Forerunner artifacts, not capturing the whole world, so getting as many forces on the ground as quietly as possible in order to search for artifacts before being noticed is a good idea. The invasion of Hoth is another easy example, albeit for a very different reason. The Rebellion's shield generator prevents a direct assault, so the Imperials are forced to land their initial forces pretty far away before lumbering overland to blow up the generator, and then moving on to their actual goal of destroying Echo Base. That whole battle would have gone very differently if the Imperials had someone acting behind the lines to take out that shield generator beforehand, which is a very important concept of many invasions that kind of goes overlooked in favour of the big huge battle. What I mean is special forces, paratroopers, partisans, traitors.
I'm the spy.
All of these that do clandestine work behind enemy lines that can have a vital effect on the invasion at large. Like Dr. Yue turning off the Arakeen shields and capturing Duke Leto in Dune, the real-life paratroopers on D-Day destroying bridges to stop German reinforcements, or those zealots that the Covenant sent out on Reach. All much smaller forces than the main invasion, but key to that invasion achieving its goals, which can be pretty varied. In the aforementioned Dune, it was to destroy the Atreides family, which is very different to what happened in real life on D-Day, out on Geonosis in Star Wars. If the goal is something quick and surgical, then just invading and leaving might be sufficient. If there's more long-term goals, then there is going to be a lot more work that needs to be done after the initial touchdown and the big dramatic battle to allow for continued operations. Avatar 2 has a pretty interesting take on invasion in general really, because the biggest threat to those landings isn't a dedicated, prepared enemy force, but instead the dangerous local flora and fauna. The landing isn't contested in quite the same way the other invasion examples I've mentioned were, but the voracious jungle still presents an unacceptable threat to continued operations after the landing. So upon the RDA's return to Pandora, they do everything they can to secure those landing sites for long-term use. The most dramatic thing they do is using the insane matter-antimatter engines of the interstellar craft to torch the landing sites practically down to bedrock. The shock and awe from these landings buys the RDA forces enough time and space to begin permanent construction on a vastly larger scale than their earlier efforts, all protected from the jungle by a massive dead zone. They still bring in stuff from Earth, but the equipment from the initial landing allows them to be largely self-sufficient. That's not the case with every invasion though. Real life isn't a strategy game where troops and materials pop out of buildings if you have the resources to make them. They have to be shipped around, and the gargantuan effort to retake the European continent after D-Day required a lot of supplies and manpower to be brought in. Since actual ports could not be captured in a usable state, everything had to be brought in onto the beaches, or onto massive temporary ports called mulberry harbours that were brought in to make things easier. All of this comes under the banner of logistics, and it's what wins wars. Creating infrastructure to go from the sea to the land is a lot easier than going from space to the ground. Yeah, ships might be fine coming down to land, but not every spaceship is necessarily capable of that, leading to a bottleneck. If you wanted to create a space version of a mulberry harbour, perhaps a space elevator of some sort could work. Just a regular sci-fi tether to a big ship acting as a temporary spaceport. But since even that distance is still way further than just a jetty down a beach, the elevator would still be pretty vulnerable to attack. So maybe you could do an even shorter one, just to go from a hovering ship to the surface so it doesn't need to be able to land? I'm absolutely sure both of these ideas already exist somewhere in sci-fi, so let me know in the comments below. One variant of this idea is the Covenant invasion towers they used on Reach. Yeah, it's a tower, but the way it connects to the ship it's transferring troops from is through teleportation. So there's no physical link. The ship just needs to be kind of nearby, and they cloak the forces near them. These are a fantastic concept and one of the few bits of invasion logistics infrastructure I can think of in sci-fi that isn't just a dropship of some kind. As we can see, there's a lot more going on in planetary invasions than you might think. There's all sorts of short or long-term goals for them, and many ways to achieve those goals beyond just committing more and more dropships to battle. These fictional scenarios also mirror some of the most dramatic moments in real-life history, and that history is also a fantastic source of inspiration for more of the wider elements of an invasion than the big crazy battles that we all know and love. You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our frigate, fighter and carrier design reference books, as well as 1 week early access to upcoming videos. Thanks to our supporters, and thank you for watching.